안녕하세요. 오늘은 사회자 마르타 알리나입니다. 저는 서울 스타트업스의 CEO를 맡고 있습니다. 오늘의 행사가 인천 스타트업학의 글로벌 컨퍼런스 인환으로 마련된 만큼 향후의 내용은 가급적으로 영어로 진행하도록 하겠습니다. Hello, my name is Martha and I'm the hustler behind Seoul Startups, the biggest international startup community here in Korea. I have the pleasure to invite you to listen to three fabulous speakers sharing their insights and experiences on AI and data science in the current world as part of the Post-Pandemic Initiative webinar series powered by Seedstars and Shinhan's Innovation Growth Platform. The aim of this series is to ensure continued education on technology, innovation, ecosystem development, impact, and capacity of building an entrepreneurial and global startup hub in Korea and Asia. Shinhan Financial Group is the biggest financial service provider in Korea and has long since been supporting the growth and development of the startup community in Korea and Asia, helping connect the startups with the global entrepreneurial ecosystem. This October will be the official launch of the initiative's Incheon Startup Park, an international hub for all international entrepreneurship-related stakeholders. Seedstars is a Swiss-based group with the mission to impact people's lives in emerging markets through technology and entrepreneurship, with a particular focus on sustainable development goals of the UN. Seedstars connects stakeholders, builds companies from scratch with public and private partners, and invests in high-growth startups within these ecosystems. Seedstars aims at fostering impact, investing, and impact entrepreneurship all over the world through different activities that range from startup scouting, events organization, to company building and acceleration programs. Seedstars has built the world's biggest community of change makers in emerging and developed markets. I would like to invite you to listen to a fascinating presentation by our first speaker, Myung-rak Kim, who started off as a programmer making computer games since his school days. He started an artificial intelligence company called Greensoft in 2015. He's currently serving as an adjunct professor at Yonsei University, Hankuk University of Foreign Study, teaching artificial intelligence in the financial and sports fields. He also teaches about big data and artificial intelligence implementation in Sejong University, Ilji University, Dankook University, Kyunghee University, Ulsan Institute of Science and Technology, and Chosun University, and is also a renowned author of books about artificial intelligence in our daily lives. Without further ado, I invite you to listen to his presentation.
Thank you for your kind introduction. 인천 스타트업 파크 온라인 웨비나에 참여해 주셔서 감사합니다. 지금부터 제가 데이터와 AI가 어떻게 포스트 팬데믹의 미래를 만들어 나갈지 라는 문제의식을 갖고 발표를 하도록 하겠습니다. 저는 마르타가 친절하게 소개해 주신 바와 같이 이제 현재 초록소프트라고 하는 딥러닝 기술 개발을 전문적으로 하고 있는 회사의 CEO를 맡고 있고요. 병행해서 연세대학교와 한국외국어대학교에서 겸임교수로 인공지능을 가르치고 있습니다. 그리고 최근에 제가 이제 인공지능을 이해하고 활용하고자 하는 이제 보통의 분들을 위해서 그분들이 인공지능을 쉽게 이해할 수 있도록 도와줄 수 있는 이것이 인공지능이다라는 이름의 책을 써서 이제 출간을 한 바 있습니다. 제가 이제 말씀드리려고 하는 내용은 이제 첫째는 지금 AI가 상당히 AI 기술이 많이 언급되고 있고 상당히 유망한 걸로 지금 얘기가 되고 있지만 실제로는 좀 AI가 넘고 있지 못하는 한계가 분명히 존재합니다. AI를 활용해서 제대로 된 비즈니스를 만들기가 무척 어려워요. 전 세계에서 가장 유명한 AI 회사는 이제 구글이 인수했던 딥마인드라고 할 수도 있는데 딥마인드조차도 아직은 흑자를 내지 못하고 지금까지 언론에 이제 보도된 바에 의하면 10억 달러의 손실을 보고 있습니다. 좀 그런 좀 아이러니한 상황이 계속 벌어지고 있는데 그 AI를 이용해서 제대로 된 비즈니스 모델을 만들기 어려운 이유가 크게 두 가지가 있습니다. 첫 번째는 이제 납득하기 어렵다는 것이죠. AI의 결과를 우리가 AI가 어떠한 과정을 거쳐서 저런 결과를 내는지 이해하기가 상당히 어려운 그런 부분이 항상 존재하는데 그 이유는 우리가 이제 AI가 뭐 영어로 Artificial Intelligence고 뭐 우리나라 말로는 인공지능이잖아요. 그래서 이름만 보면 인간의 지능을 흉내내고 있는 걸로 보이는데 사실 현대 AI는 인간의 지능보다는 인간의 감성을 흉내내고 있습니다. 그래서 인공 감성이라는 표현이 사실은 좀 더 정확한 표현일 수가 있어요. 왜 그러냐면 주로 특히 이제 머신러닝 같은 경우에는 수많은 사례를 기반으로 확률적으로 가장 최선의 또는 확률적으로 가장 맞을 확률이 높은 것을 도출하는 그런 과정인데, 그것은 바로 우리 인간이 수많은 경험과 기억을 토대로 확률적으로 가장 좋은 이상적인 것을 도출하는 과정을 흉내낸 것이거든요. 근데 그런 과정이 바로 인간의 어떤 감성적인 판단에 해당이 돼요. 그래서 인공지능이 인간의 이성이 아니라 인간의 감성적인 판단 과정을 흉내내다 보니까 어떤 문제가 있냐면, 인공지능이 어떤 결과를 내는 과정을 우리가 이성적으로 이해하기가 어렵고, 그리고 인공지능이 왜 그런 결과를 내는지 설명하기가 어려운 거죠. 인공지능은 인간의 감성적 판단을 흉내내고 있는데, 우리는 반대로 인공지능한테 너가 왜 그런 결과를 내는지 이성적으로 설명해 보라고 하는 상당히 좀 어색한 상황이 계속되고 있습니다. 이 부분 때문에 인공지능을 받아들이지 못하는 경우가 상당히 많이 발생을 하고 있어요. 그러다 보니까 빅데이터를 가져와서 인공지능으로 분석해서 어떤 결과를 내는지 이런 흐름이 될 텐데, 빅데이터가 어떻게 활용되고 있는지를 오랜 기간 살펴보니 크게 세 가지 어떤 레벨로 나눌 수 있었습니다. 레벨 1, 레벨 2, 레벨 3 이렇게 나눌 수 있었는데요. 좀 설명을 드리자면 레벨 1은 이런 거예요. 우리나라 축구 대표팀 감독이 선수를 뽑습니다. 국가대표팀 선수를 뽑아야겠죠. 그런데 우리나라에 축구 선수가 많잖아요. 마르타도 축구 혹시 좋아하시나요?
네, 되게 좋아해요.
그런가요? 예, 다행입니다. 그럼 우리나라에 있는 모든 축구 선수들 개개인의 어떤 신체적인 능력이라든지 경기에서의 퍼포먼스라든지 이런 거를 다 모아서 시각화할 수 있죠. 그러면 아주 멋진 시각화 자료가 나올 텐데, 그거를 이제 감독한테 보여주면 감독이 그걸 보고 나서 결국은 자기 생각대로 뽑습니다, 선수를. 빅데이터를 시각화한 결과를 봤다고 해서 안 뽑을 선수를 뽑거나 뽑을 선수를 안 뽑지는 않는다는 거예요. 이렇게 빅데이터를 이용하는 거가 레벨 1입니다. 보통 빅데이터를 이용한다고 하면 레벨 1에서 끝나요. 근데 왜 레벨을 많이 하냐면 적은 노력을 들이고도 꽤 있어 보이는 결과를 낼 수 있기 때문인데, 이 레벨 1의 문제가 뭐냐면 빅데이터를 시각화했다고 해서 어떤 의사결정이 바뀌거나 하지는 않는다는 거죠. 이거는 비유를 들자면 비행기를 수천억짜리 비행기를 산속에 묻어놓고 카페 인테리어로 쓰는 거예요. 여기서 말씀드리는 비행기는 빅데이터를 상징하는 겁니다. 상당히 빅데이터를 아깝게 쓰는 거죠. 레벨 2는 이거보다는 좀 나은데, 그 축구 대표팀 감독이 나는 이런 기준으로 선수를 뽑는다라고 먼저 빅데이터 전문가들한테 설명을 합니다. 그럼 빅데이터 전문가들이 그걸 고려해서 선수들 개개인의 빅데이터를 모은 다음에 잘 정리해서 리포트를 만들어서 감독한테 보여주는 거예요. 그럼 감독이 그걸 보고 판단을 하겠죠. 레벨 1보다는 감독의 의사결정에 영향을 끼칠 확률은 생기죠. 하지만 여전히 결국은 감독이 뽑는 거예요. 레벨 3 정도 돼야 빅데이터가 정말 제대로 쓰이는 건데, 이건 뭐냐면 인공지능이 빅데이터를 분석해서 우리나라가 월드컵에 나가기 위해서는 어떤 선수가 필요하다는 걸 직접적으로 뽑는 겁니다. 그러니까 레벨 1과 레벨 2 그리고 레벨 3의 차이는 뭐냐면, 사람이 결정을 한다. 그러면 레벨 1, 레벨 2고, 사람의 판단력을 내려놓고 인공지능이 결정을 하겠다. 이게 레벨 3인데, 레벨 3까지 가는 조직은 많지가 않아요. 왜 그러냐면 앞에서 설명드린 것처럼 인공지능이 어떤 결과를 도출하는 과정을 우리가 이해하기가 어렵고 이성적으로 설명이 잘 안 되다 보니까, 그런 부분을 받아들이지 못하는 조직은 레벨 3까지 가지를 못하고 레벨 1, 기껏해야 레벨 2에서 멈춘다는 것이죠. 이게 지금 현실적으로 벌어지는 일이고요. AI를 이용해서 제대로 된 비즈니스 모델을 만들지 못하는 두 번째 이유는, AI로 우리가 어떤 아웃풋을 만들어낼 수가 있는데, 이런 아웃풋을 만드는데 인풋이 너무 많이 들어가요. AI라는 것이. 지금 보시면 2016년에 알파고 리가 이세돌 이기고 큰 센세이션을 일으켰죠. 근데 그 당시 기술은 우리가 뭐 3세대 AI라 이렇게 부르기도 하고요. 그 다음에 4세대 AI인 알파고 제로가 이제 중국의 커제 선수를 이기기도 하고, 현재 구글의 딥마인드의 알파고는 이제 5세대까지 가 있어요. 근데 최근에 작년 연말에 우리나라에서 4.5세대 AI가 이제 한돌이라고 하는 바둑 솔루션이 이세돌과 대결을 했는데 그렇게 압도적으로 이기진 못했어요. 4년 전 알파고 기술보다 작년에 우리 기술이 기술적으로는 더 앞섰는데 눈에 보이는 성과가 더 두드러지지 않았죠. 이거 왜 어떻게 된 거냐면 4년 전에는 알파고가 3세대 기술을 썼지만 엄청난 리소스를 쏟아부은 거예요. 컴퓨터도 CPU도 1000대 이상 썼고 GPU도 300대 쓰고 구글의 최고의 엔지니어들을 상당히 많이 투입하는, 그렇게 했기 때문에 그런 퍼포먼스가 나는 거예요. 그러니까 AI로 결과를 내려면 결국은 리소스 싸움입니다. 엄청난 리소스를 투입해야 결과가 나오는 거죠. 그러니까 우리가 얻을 수 있는 결과보다 더 많은 리소스를 쏟아부어야 그런 성과가 나기 때문에 이런 일이 벌어지는 거예요. 그러니까 우리가 마라탕은 뭐 아웃백 같은 그런 패밀리 레스토랑 많이 가보셨죠?
네.
그렇죠. 저도 그런 좋아하는데 거기 가면 이제 뭐 저는 스테이크 시키시잖아요.
맞아요.
그렇죠. 네.
제일 맛있죠.
그렇죠, 맛있죠. 그럼 보통 이렇게 나이프 같은 걸 쓰실 텐데
네.
어떤 사람이 그 스테이크를 썰겠다고 전기톱을 가져오면 어떤 생각이 드시나요? 좀 가하다라는 생각이 드시죠?
그렇죠.
그렇죠. 예, 그런 일이 벌어지는 거예요. 그러니까 AI는 상당히 비싸고 비용이 많이 들기 때문에, 그러니까 통계로 간단하게 해결할 수 있는 문제를 AI를 이용해서 푼다는 거는 마치 패밀리 레스토랑에서 스테이크를 전기톱으로 써는 것 같은 그런 일들이 벌어지는 거예요. 아웃풋에 비해서 인풋이 너무 과도하게 큰 거죠. 자, 이 두 가지 얘기, 그러니까 AI는 납득하기 어렵다는 것과 AI는 인풋에 비해서 아웃풋이 너무 크다는 이 두 가지 얘기를 결합하면 어떻게 되냐면은, AI는 납득하기 어렵다 보니까 중요한 의사결정을 AI한테 맡기는 경우가 드물어요. 그러니까 되게 지엽적이고 중요하지 않은 의사결정만 AI한테 맡기는 일이 계속되고 있어요. 그런 중요하지 않은 의사결정은 사실 얻을 수 있는 효용이 크지 않죠. 결과적으로 AI한테 얻을 수 있는 효용은 작은데 AI한테 들어가야 되는 인풋은 여전히 큰 거예요. 그러니까 결과적으로 AI한테 들어가는 인풋이 여전히 이만큼 큰데 AI한테 얻을 수 있는 아웃풋은 상당히 낮은, 당연히 비즈니스 모델이 안 나오죠. 그러니까 우리가 AI한테 예를 들어서 우리 회사의 다음 CEO는 누가 돼야 되느냐, 이런 문제를 맡길 수 있다면 AI한테 들어가는 인풋에 비해서 충분히 큰 아웃풋을 우리가 얻을 수 있는데, 그런 중요한 의사결정을 AI한테 맡기는 경우는 거의 없습니다. 이제 이런 문제가 현재 AI 비즈니스에 있어요. 그런데 우리가 이제 그 포스트 팬데믹 이후에 이 AI가 이런 현재 한계를 극복할 수 있는지에 대해서 제가 좀 말씀을 드리면, 우리 인류가 많은 전염병을 겪었죠. 그중에 이제 가장 큰 거는 뭐 14세기 중세 흑사병, 뭐 패스트를 들 수밖에 없는데, 유럽 인구의 뭐 3분의 1이 그때 사망하셨다고 하죠. 엄청난 피해죠, 지금 생각해보면. 근데 그렇게 되니까 어떤 일이 벌어졌냐면 노동력이 부족해졌어요. 그러니까 농사를 지을 수 있는 소위 농노들이 많이 줄었어요. 그러니까 그 봉건 영주들이 그 농노들한테 처우를 잘해줘야 되는 거죠. 왜냐면 농노가 귀하니까. 그러니까 결과적으로 그 노동자의 권리가 증대됐고, 이제 농노주의가 붕괴가 되고 상업주의가 팽배하고 유럽식 자본주의가 시작되는 그런 연쇄적인 과정이 있었고, 두 번째는 사람이 부족하다 보니까 기술 혁신을 아무래도 하게 되죠. 예전에는 사람을 많이 동원하면 할 수 있지만 그럴 수가 없으니까, 이거는 이제 익히 아시는 산업혁명의 어떤 단초가 된 거예요. 그렇다면 우리가 이제 그 코비드-19 이후에 지금 어떤 상황이 됐냐면, 언텐트, 지금 이 세미나도 원래 다 모여서 해야 되는데 그렇지 못하잖아요. 그러니까 이렇게 비대면 문화가 상당히 지속되고 있어요. 코로나가 해결됐다고 해서 예전으로 완전히 돌아갈 것 같지 않다는 거예요. 예전만큼 사람들이 자주 모이고 하는 것보다는 여전히 많은 것들을 비대면 상태, 언텐트 상태에서 할 걸로 생각이 되는데, 이 언텐트 문화라는 게 그냥 눈으로 보이기에는 사람들이 직접 모이지 않는다, 온라인으로 해결한다, 이렇게 느껴지시겠지만, 이걸 좀 깊이 있게 보자면 어떤 의미냐면, 사람이 직접 관여하고 직접 판단하는 거를 안 해도 큰 문제가 없다라는 걸 우리가 알게 됐다는 거예요. 그러니까 예전에는 어떤 중요한 의사결정은 다 모여가지고 토의해서 결정하고 그랬는데 지금은 우리가 언텐트 상황에서 결정을 하고 우리가 일일이 관여하지 않아도 컴퓨터가 잘 판단해 줄 수도 있고 이런 걸 지금 계속 접하고 있어요. 그러다 보니까 앞으로는 그 뉴노멀 시대에는 AI가 데이터를 기반으로 무언가를 판단하는 거에 대한 거부감이 예전에보다 많이 감소할 것이다 라고 저는 기대를 하고요. 그렇게 되면은 중요한 의사결정을 AI한테 맡길 수 있게 됩니다. 그러면은 우리가 AI한테 얻을 수 있는 효용이 커지니까 앞에서 말씀드린 그런 문제가 많이 해결되는 거죠. AI한테 들어가는 인풋은 여전히 크겠지만 중요한 의사결정을 AI한테 맡기기 때문에 우리가 큰 효과를 기대할 수 있고 그렇다면 비즈니스 모델이 만들어질 수 있는 거예요. 하지만 사람은 여전히 이제 가치 판단과 창조성이 필요한 그런 일은 우리가 해야 되기 때문에 그런 건 여전히 우리가 하고 그렇지 않은 일은 AI한테 맡기는 시대로 전환이 될 거고요. 우리가 이제 마이클 샌델 교수가 정의란 무엇인가라는 수업에서 이제 저스티스에 대해서 얘기를 하시는데 저건 가치 판단의 문제이기 때문에 영원히 답이 없죠. 저런 문제에 대해서 고민하고 토론하는 거는 우리가 계속 해야 될 테고 퀸 아시죠?
네.
그렇죠. 퀸 좋아하시죠? 보헤미안 랩소디, 그러니까 머큐리가 보헤미안 랩소디를 만든 것처럼 그런 아주 혁신적인 창조적인 결과를 만들어내는 저런 일은 우리가 해야 될 겁니다. 그렇지 않은 일들을 우리가 인공지능한테 맡길 수 있는 시대가 포스트 팬데믹 시대에 좀 더 빨리 오지 않을까라고 기대를 해봅니다.
대표님 강의를 되게 재밌게 들었습니다. 진짜 감사합니다. Stay tuned for our next speaker.
Our next speaker, Deepika Sandeep, is a seasoned leader in the field of analytics, machine learning, and natural language processing. Currently, she's an AI leader at Honeywell, driving AI for smart buildings with focus on sustainability, automation, and optimization of operations. She has led AI programs in several organizations across domains, spanning Industry 4.0, renewable energy, automotive manufacturing, real estate, and healthcare. She was featured in Analytics India magazine's 40 Under 40 Data Scientists and Women in AI Leadership lists. She's also a recognized leader in the renewable energy sector, ranked in 40 Under 40 Most Promising Leaders in Indian solar industry, and is among Asia's most influential women in renewable energy. Deepika, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. The topic of my talk today is AI in the new normal, relevance and relook. So it is very clear now that digitalization and automation are going to be the key drivers of the post-pandemic world. The question that we are now asking is, what role does AI have to play in all this? So how will AI become more relevant in the post-pandemic world? So I will touch upon this by quoting a few examples from various industry verticals like healthcare, education, manufacturing, retail, and hospitality. So to start with, AI in telehealth. So telemonitoring is the essence of telehealth. So with the advent of IoT, a lot of sensors and wearables are becoming very popular today. So these collect data on the vital parameters of the human body. And this data is then transmitted to a central repository where it is stored and analyzed on a real-time basis. And intimation on any abnormality in the human body is sent to the end user remotely. So this also means wider reach of healthcare, which is especially useful in regions where access to healthcare facilities is still a challenge. Computer vision and image processing have been used extensively for medical image analysis for quite a few decades now. So this is only set to increase in the post-pandemic world because remoteness is going to be key. So this is useful for early detection of conditions and diseases like detection of certain tumors, cancers, diabetic retinopathy, and so on. Healthcare data still is being recorded and preserved in non-digitized formats in various regions. But this is set to change going forward because recording healthcare data in electronic formats is going to be critical for analysis, especially remotely. And in the post-pandemic world, AI-based EHR or electronic health record systems for evidence-based care will be more widely adopted. Virtual assistants or chatbots are being extensively used even in the healthcare sector for performing various tasks like preliminary health assessment, sending out reminders for routine health checks, and so on. AI for education. So with the explosion of the online mode of education, it is all the more necessary now for us to detect fake or undesirable content. And AI becomes necessary for automatically classifying appropriate versus inappropriate content, especially for children. Yet another example of AI in education is Google's Bolo app. So this app is designed to aid primary education. So it has a virtual tutor which narrates stories to children, even in the absence of a physical person being there. And it explains concepts to children using a storytelling approach so that it's easy for children to grasp. So this is built using text-to-speech recognition technology and is especially useful in a rural setting where primary education is still a luxury. AI in manufacturing. So digital twins, which are replicas of physical systems, are going to be more widely adopted going forward, both in the design and the operations phase for remote informed decision-making and control. Safety on the shop floor in factories is paramount. So checks are being done today on the compliance with pandemic specific guidelines. Are people complying with social distancing norms or not? Are people wearing masks or not? Are people on the shop floor wearing safety helmets or not? And all these checks today are being automated through surveillance using video cameras and video analytics on the footage that is captured. Also going forward, remote diagnostics, real-time monitoring for predictive maintenance will become critical because we want to avoid as much truck rolls as possible. We want to avoid physical visits by service technicians to the site as much as possible. We want to do as much as possible remotely. So in that kind of a scenario, timely recommendation for corrective action will be imperative. AI in retail. Brick and mortar retail stores are going to see increased surveillance in future. This is not only to check if people are adhering to the social distancing norms or not, but also to find out which zones or which regions in the retail stores are having more footfall in order to design better sales and marketing strategies and so on. Touchless or frictionless shopping will be the norm in the new world. So for instance, business models like that of Amazon Go, which is more of a grab and go kind of a model, where there is no need for people to stand in lines, no need for checkouts, which has minimal contact with other people. So these kind of models will become more popular in the post-pandemic world. A lot of e-tailers are also providing personalized experience for each shopper and virtual try-on options. So the advantage that the e-tailers are having with such options in place is that they are able to use facial emotion and gesture recognition for detecting the sentiment of each shopper who comes online and are able to customize the product recommendation for each shopper accordingly. AI in tourism, leisure, and hospitality industry. So today, visiting various places of interest is a constraint. So immersive technologies like virtual reality, mixed reality are coming in handy for delivering experiences of visiting various places of interest like museums. So even if we are not able to actually physically visit, say, a museum, we will not be losing out on that experience. And this is being made possible by immersive technologies today. AI is also being increasingly used for delivering enhanced customer experience. Travel bots have taken up the role of travel agents to plan itineraries and tailor travel experiences. Customer service bots have taken up the role of customer service representatives for providing assistance to customers online. AI for human resource management. So AI is coming in handy for automating the recruitment process. So say there are n number of candidate resumes and n number of job descriptions. How do we find automatically the match between candidate profiles and various opportunities? So natural language processing is very useful in this context. Bots are being used for the initial screening process in recruitment. A lot of interviews are being conducted online today. So video interview assessment using natural language understanding and emotion AI are becoming increasingly popular. So now that AI will be entering mainstream, should we relook at mainstream AI implementation? Is a critical question for us to answer. So there are a lot of discussions and debates around the ethical use of AI today. So it's very similar to the classic trolley problem in philosophy. So there are concerns right from the data collection phase. A lot of sensitive data about race, ethnicity, religion, gender are being collected today, and people are not really comfortable having such data available publicly. Biased data for learning is another concern. If machine learning models are trained on biased data, they learn this bias, and this inherent bias gets manifested in the inferencing phase or the prediction phase as well. So for example, a machine learning model may refer to a doctor as a he and a nurse as a she, although it is not absolutely necessary for a doctor to be a male and a nurse to be a female. There is a lot of unrest around facial recognition technology today. So facial recognition has been known to fail in a few scenarios where the color of the skin is quite different from the color of the skin in the images that the model was trained on. And this is a serious concern. So because of which quite a few organizations today have taken the decision of not using facial recognition for any application. Yet another concern is on explainability. So if a deep learning model fails in certain circumstances, it is not straightforward to figure out why it has failed. So given the complex nature, structure and functioning of deep neural networks, it is not easy for us to understand the functioning of the deep learning models. So this is a concern because as human beings, we are not very comfortable using black box systems. Autonomous vehicles. So we are all aware of that specific incident of a driverless car owned by Uber, which ran over a pedestrian, resulting in the pedestrian's death. So this happened because the driverless car failed to detect the presence of the pedestrian in front and did not stop at the right time, which resulted in the fatal accident. So because of all these incidents and reasons, there are a lot of concerns around is it ethical to use AI in certain applications. So the way forward for this would be to have better regulations and guidelines in place and deal with each application on a case-by-case basis rather than have a complete blanket ban on the usage of AI for certain applications. AI is not a one-man army. So the success of an AI solution is dependent on a multitude of factors. Domain expertise, for instance. So an AI solution is ultimately expected to mimic the thought process of a domain expert. How the domain expert would approach the problem, how the domain expert would do the root cause analysis of the issue, and how the domain expert would eventually figure out the solution. So the same way AI solution is expected to work. So understanding and having domain expertise is a key contributor to an AI solution's success. Quality data. So without good quality data, no AI solution will be effective. Robust infrastructure. So right from the data collection phase, connectivity infrastructure for data transmission, storage, and computing capability on the cloud for training the model and its deployment. So all these are very critical for the AI solutions success. And of course, business acumen. So the insights from an AI solution should finally translate into business value, right? So be it increase in operational efficiency, be it reduction in cost by bringing down the manual effort, or be it increase in the revenue generation. So keeping that in mind on what the business value is going to be from the AI solution is critical for the success of the AI solution. The AI conundrum, how much is too much? So let's consider the carbon impact of AI. So studies have shown that training a single complex large AI model can emit as much carbon as 5 cars in their lifetime. So given this fact, it is essential to ask the question, is machine learning or deep learning essential for solving every problem in hand? The answer is a no. Just about 10% of industry's problems are being solved using deep learning today. A lot of problems can be solved using simple statistical techniques, data wrangling, data mining, exploratory data analysis, or EDA, as we call it. So a lot of these techniques like data distribution study, outlier detection, trend analysis, correlation and causation, all these techniques come in very handy for solving quite a few problems. And these are not very computationally intensive as well. So if there is a simpler method to solve the problem, that's the route we should be taking. So yet another important aspect of AI is data visualization and business intelligence. So it is a known fact that the human mind is constantly seeking stories. So storytelling approach to convey the insights from data is very effective. So connecting the dots and creating a compelling storyline by connecting various data points from disparate sources is a very effective way of conveying the insights from data in a very comprehensible manner. Also, keeping the human at the center is essential. The objective of AI is not to eliminate the human in the loop, but only to make the lives of human beings simpler by bringing about automation. So going forward, a hybrid decision-making process will be widely adopted, which will be a combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence. So to summarize, artificial intelligence and human intelligence go hand in hand and will go hand in hand in future as well. Yeah, so that brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you for your patient listening.
Our next speaker is Alexander Moltau, the author of a fascinating blog, 500 Days of Artificial Intelligence, founder of Young Sustainable Impact, currently working at KPMG, researching artificial intelligence and new business development. He also runs AI Social Research Network and is very interested and passionate about impact, social change, and climate change.
Thank you very much, Marta. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be invited to Seedstars and Shinhan Financial Group's session. So I'll just start my presentation straight away and share this screen. Let's see if you can see that. And let's see. Okay. So my name is Alex. And I currently work in KPMG IDAS, which is the section for International Development Advisory Services. And it's a small part of it that we like to call the Innovation Unit in Norway. And I'm pursuing a Masters of Social Data Science at the University of Copenhagen, where I am part of the inaugural cohort. So that means it is the first time that this education is ever taking place in Copenhagen. But what the attempt is to combine insight from social data science with these other insights from computational science or data science. So the topic for today that I was asked to talk about is how data and AI will shape the post-pandemic future. When I was asked to talk about this, I thought it would be good to think about the future in terms of the current picture that we have of AI at the moment, especially pertaining to the things that I have been looking at. So try to give you a bit of an insight into what I have been looking at and maybe what can be gleaned for that. Some large questions and some more practical ones. Okay. Marta mentioned that I am doing a project called 500 Days of Artificial Intelligence. And day one was June the 3rd in 2019, where I decided to challenge myself to write about the topic of artificial intelligence for the next 500 days. And the way that this has been going is kind of, I started to split it into these subtopics. So the first 50 days, I wrote more generally about AI concepts and this kind of general definitions. And the next 50 days, I wrote about AI safety and climate concerns. So, and the next stint was about AI and international relations. So I became increasingly interested in how artificial intelligence work on this world stage. And then further, there was this huge kind of proliferation of national strategies within artificial intelligence. So I read probably most of the national AI strategies in the world that have come out. And later during the next 100 days, I started to map out AI strategies. So also looking into these multilateral AI strategies, the indices, relationships. But from that kind of theoretical level, I thought it would be nice also to see not only kind of what is happening in these policy discussions, but also what is happening within AI hardware. Because I think talking about it in the abstract form is certainly interesting, but focusing down as well on what is actually happening in the really kind of, in the foundational research of AI hardware and where that will take us. How is that changing now? And I think that is also a lot about the future because AI is kind of discussed today as well in relation to social inequalities. And one recent example that we saw of this was that, for example, in the US, where sort of this facial recognition in policing systems were kind of halted in a way by some of the largest technology providers. That kind of started with IBM and then Amazon followed and so on and so forth. And more recently, we've seen this kind of question about the acquisition of TikTok. So who has influence, which country are we talking about? And kind of moving into questions of digital sovereignty and of different nations that influence companies. Because if you are a startup or if you are a large company, it is relatively inevitable that these discussions will influence you to some extent. And since also I'm working more NLP based in work with the United Nations, I decided to kind of round off these 500 days to look more practically and pragmatically at natural language processing. That also is a large part of artificial intelligence. Yeah. And at the same time, I think it's really important to recognize in the present that a lot of the applications of AI are very nascent, and that we have to be kind of skeptical when we see an application from a new company. So I think, we have to be equally kind of enthusiastic, but also kind of skeptical, because for a lot of the companies that work with AI, they are kind of sometimes a bit optimistic in terms of the actual impact of the product, and also kind of skewed in terms of their interpretation of results, or of what the actual product or service will do on the ground within a given country. So for the national strategies, I thought it would be worth to talk a little bit about where they have been. But just a quick question here from Marta on time. How am I doing for time? I'm doing good. Okay. So the national AI strategies have been sort of really kind of a phenomenon the last decade. And the countries that you see here marked in green, they have national AI strategies. So the question is as well, how good is a strategy, but also how is it used? But I think it is important to recognize, if you're working as an AI company, that there are nation states and they have specific things to say about how artificial intelligence will work. So these are kind of have recently, most of them have been recently developed, and it was a huge priority in the European Union to have this cooperation on artificial intelligence. So what this means is that if we think about the post-pandemic future as hopefully a time in a decade perhaps, or in 5 years, where there will be the beginning of a vaccine, or that the vaccine is starting to become rolled out, these kind of strategies or intentions are still relevant. So it is important to think about what these countries say, and also that the strategies will change depending on what kind of governance that you will find that is also shifting within each government. One example is the US strategy that is kind of heavily slanted towards the defense at the moment. But when the Obama administration was responsible, it had much more integrated kind of climate concerns and sustainability and so on and so forth. But I think personally, I think the strategies that integrate these concerns will be the ones that do the best. China has done better to that extent, but I think the French one is probably the strongest one in this regard, but also the Portuguese one that kind of includes these notions of biodiversity. But you can clearly see that in the different countries, strategies are kind of made according to national priorities. So, for example, the Norwegian strategy is very maritime focused. So this can kind of be used, and the AI papers are increasing. There's a huge increase in AI papers, but also in particular from the Asian region and specifically China. But what I think is important to think about as well is the collaboration, which is very strong in these different areas, especially China and the US. So when it comes to the European perspective, there's also this kind of large extent of government focus on this in Europe. So if you think about Europe and you think about AI, you should also really carefully consider the government's role in that, and that they actually play quite a big role in these type of projects. And the AI patent picture has also been changing a lot, and I think it will continue to, but I think that the East Asia and Pacific in particular, but also the Europe and Central Asia may increase over the coming decades. So how does the picture look today? There is an AI index score. I would be skeptical of this as well, but it is the case that US is currently doing quite well, and that there are a lot of countries that are maybe does not have the same kind of capabilities. And I mean, it's interesting to sort of like try to look and see what are people measured on, like what are these different countries, how are the different AI indices that are popping up measuring different countries. Within the Nordic countries, for example, Finland is really good, while Norway is not doing that great. But one important thing that I saw, like during this time that I looked at all these different questions related to AI. So in the post-pandemic future, there are shifting computational needs. So what I would say about that is that non-volatile memory, as in the kind of storage of information, is important, but there will be an increased importance in this more computing heavy facilities, like the collaboration between OpenAI and Microsoft. So, but also in the post-pandemic future and in the years ahead, there seems to be kind of a shock of unemployment, hunger, deficits, poverty, inequality, combined with increasing natural disasters. So invest your time to address these issues. That is my kind of main concern here, that this is kind of actually where we have to put our money, is to address these type of issues together. And I think startups are some of the most important actors in making that happen, because thinking new is not easy, but there are some fantastic people in different companies that actually address these issues. So there are also larger questions in terms of peaceful coexistence, with advanced AI in warfare seeming more and more likely, but also the deployment of broader AI. And I'm not saying broad AI as in some of this Terminator style or this really advanced artificial general intelligence, but we have to ask what AI is optimized for. Is it optimized to address these kind of solutions that I previously mentioned? Or is it kind of forgotten in this kind of picture of urgency of crisis that we are seeing? Because my argument is that we need to be making artificial intelligence work for our shared ecology. And that means optimizing for some different goals. And it also means being aware of what I would call more responsible digital value chains. So these supply chains, right, of artificial intelligence and machine learning. As I mentioned, this shifting infrastructure and the requirements, but also the increased compute that is occurring. So what I would realize in that context is that AI can do a lot in terms of our cities, our components, our recycling, utilities, energy. But we have to be aware that every single imprint that is digital has a physical consequence in terms of satellite projects. And I would mention the Elon Musk project as well, and also that of Jeff Bezos, that are both intending to do enormously large satellite projects in the coming year. And also the cable projects of the undersea cables that are currently being built, like the one that is being built partly by Facebook, the one called To Africa, that will triple the network capacity of Africa. And also that every single digital appliance, whether it is for consumer use or within larger companies, require minerals. So mining is not likely to decrease. And you know, what does that say about how AI will work for our shared ecology? All things that we need to be aware of, combined with this kind of digital nationalism, or this increased focus on protectionism of the digital and the safety and security. So let's make it work for our home, because we share this planet together, and artificial intelligence in a post-pandemic future and the use of data is in the end our responsibility as a form of governance. So global focus is not any less important. It is more important than ever, and it's important to think about the peace and to think about sustainability in a very broad context, to think about collaboration. And to do that, we need startups, and we need to invest in the right things. So yeah, because we live in this beautiful planet, and to create solutions for a post-pandemic future includes really integrating climate concerns into these advanced technologies. So at least that's what I had to say for now, and I'm very much open for questions, and I really look forward to discussing with the other participants. So I will stop my screen share there. Okay.
Thank you, Alex. The first question I would like to ask is, what do ordinary people like myself need to know about AI, especially in 2020 and beyond in the post-pandemic era? And I would like to pass that first question to Young-up. What do you think normal people, what are the basic things normal people should know about AI in order to survive in the new world?
그 보통의 사람들에게 AI는 마치 인터넷 기술처럼 활용될 수가 있습니다. 그러니까 우리가 지금 우리가 인터넷을 이용하지 않고 어떤 일을 하는 것이 불가능한데요. 지금은 아니지만 앞으로 뭐 짧으면 5년, 10년 안에 이제 AI 기술을 이용하지 않고 우리가 무슨 일을 하는 것이 불가능해질 거예요. 우리가 그 인터넷 기술을 아주 깊숙이 알지 못해도 웹서핑을 하고 이메일을 주고받는 게 가능합니다. 마찬가지로 보통의 사람들은 AI 기술을 아주 깊숙이 알지 못하더라도 충분히 AI를 다양한 분야에 활용해 볼 수가 있을 거예요, 앞으로. 그래서 너무 크고 거창한 프로젝트에만 AI를 적용하려고 하지 말고 간단하고 쉬운 그런 프로젝트에도 AI를 도입하려는 시도를 계속하는 것이 앞으로 중요하다고 생각합니다.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. Deepika, what do you think about that? You talked about new implementations of AI in everyday life. How will that influence average non-tech, non-specifically AI tech people?
So the first thing to note is data science or AI is not rocket science. It's more common sense and logic than anything else. So not everything needs a deep learning or a complex machine learning algorithm for a solution. We can use very basic statistical techniques for solving a lot of problems. So the core or the fundamentals of AI are in statistics, math, statistics, and logic. And of course, computer science, because we need programming. Yeah, so all these put together, when they come together is when we have AI. And the key objective of AI is automation, making our lives easier. So that's going to be key going forward as well in the new normal. So automation and remoteness are going to be key. And this is how AI is going to play a critical role in the post-pandemic world.
Thank you so much. Alex, we talk about normal average Joe people, but how about, I guess in a lot of the AI development is still being dictated by the governments and the government policies. So how do you see this year's events influencing government policies when it comes to AI around the world, specifically when it comes to our point of interest, which is Korea?
Yeah, so that's a really big question, but I think I'll try to answer it in two segments. So this year, I think we've seen that the possibilities and the limitations of AI has come to the forefront, because we have been wanting to use AI in health technology, and there has been some amazing insights that has been derived from AI based on trying to gather a lot of information from a large base of research to understand the coronavirus. And there has been attempts at tracking, and some people do it well and some people might do it less well in understanding these great amounts of information. But what I would say is it has been shown that the people who do try and that has tried for some time are more successful. And I think what was said previously about AI like the internet, I really like that similarity, because it is kind of pervasive. At least that's what I've seen when I've been writing every day and trying to go into different segments of society, is that it is within so many different areas of society. And I think that is what is exciting. And also, I think the importance as well of seeing it like a soccer match and seeing it like a friendly, collaboration between different countries. So for the second part of your question, when it comes to the case of South Korea, I think the AI strategy was quite clear as opposed to other countries, because it was stated that the government has earmarked 1.7 trillion in the next year's budget for data networks and AI, and it's also up 50%. So from the previous year, and that was in 2019. So I think in comparison to a lot of other countries, the South Korean government has been very explicit about their kind of will to push this forward. And you don't see that in every single national strategy, at least. But on the private side and the startup side, there has been a commitment to invest, but I think you might have a better picture of that than I do.
Well, even better picture than myself. Myung-Nok has an ideal picture because he's the CEO of an AI company here in Korea. So I kind of want to push that picture towards you. How do you evaluate the government policies here in Korea when it comes to AI development? Have you personally also benefited from those policies? And what do you think Korea has to do more to have better AI development than it has currently?
오케이. 대한민국 정부는 그 AI 생태계를 발전시키기 위해서 이제 많은 지원을 하고 있습니다. 잘 아시다시피 한국은 석유 같은 자원이 많은 나라도 아니고 관광으로 돈을 벌 수 있는 나라도 아니에요. 그래서 이런 AI 같은 하이 테크놀로지를 우리가 잘 발전시켜야지만 나라가 부강해질 수 있는 나라이기 때문에 상당히 어떤 절박한 필요를 갖고 국가 차원에서 우리 같은 AI 스타트업을 키우기 위해서 많은 이제 정책을 만들어서 지원을 해주고 있어요. 그리고 AI를 잘 하기 위해서는 그 수학적인 어떤 수학 기초가 상당히 잘 뒷받침되어야 되는데 한국 학생들은 수학 공부를 또 열심히 하고 그 한국에는 또 뛰어난 프로그래머들이 많습니다. 그래서 AI를 잘 할 수 있는 환경은 잘 갖춰져 있다고 생각합니다. 그런데 한국 시장에서 AI를 이용해서 우리가 다양한 비즈니스 모델을 만들어내야 되는데 그게 잘 안 되고 있어요. 그래서 미국이나 뭐 유럽 같은 다른 그런 시장에서 AI를 이용한 어떤 훌륭한 비즈니스 모델이 어떻게 만들어지고 있는지 주의 깊게 보면서 그런 것들을 좀 배우려고 한국 AI 스타트업에서는 항상 노력하고 있습니다.
Thank you so much for your answer. Deepika, you having heard that, and I guess also about the European market, like how do you feel that the Indian market places itself on the AI scene? You have some very talented and amazing engineers working on really astonishing technologies. So is there support on the government side? Is there support on the corporate side? What is the situation with the startup scene there when it comes to AI?
Yes, so the government the support from the government is immense. So there have been quite a few bodies developed, including the AI task force by the government for fostering innovation in the AI field. So the focus areas when it comes to the Indian market for the Indian government would be AI for healthcare, AI for agriculture, AI for smart cities development, smart mobility and transportation. So to do with easing the traffic, so more to do with solving the local problems in India. So that's what the focus is all about when it comes to the Indian government's focus on AI. So there are quite a few use cases like AI has been quite a few startups in the agriculture AI and quite a few for healthcare. So quite a few startups have been cropping up lately in this space as well. So, and we see quite a lot of push from the government for innovating in these fields.
How about corporations and startups? Like how are they placing themselves when it comes to like pushing the AI development?
So the R&D focus for large corporates enterprises would be more like collaborating with the startups for AI. So although most of them have in-house AI teams or development, but they do want to collaborate with the startups for many of the applications, mostly to do with video analytics, and quite a bit on the smart city space, right? So surveillance, video analytics, security, and waste management. So these are the kind of areas which, and AI for social good, that is yet another area of interest. So not a lot of these large enterprises would have capabilities for doing this. So the way they are targeting, the way they are looking at it is through collaborations with startups in these new spaces and new applications of AI.
Oh, Alex, you wanted to add something on that, right?
Yeah, just a short comment is that the sort of the AI for all strategy is actually one of the only AI strategies in the world that actually talks about social inequality, which is very unique in an AI strategy. It's almost, I haven't seen it, I've read most of the AI strategies in the world, and I haven't seen that many places elsewhere than in India. So it's really unique, and it's a really important aspect that could be included more in these strategies. It's important for society.
That's great that you mentioned that, because actually all of you, to some degree during your presentations, mentioned AI being an important component of social impact, that it has to go in that direction in the future, despite the fact that it's also used for the opposite purposes, like Alex mentioned in defense industry, which you would think that's not really for good. What do you think will be happening with the AI, with the social impacts, and why is it so important that we talk about it right now? Alex, why don't we start with you, since you already picked up the subject?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to talk about, but I think, you know, generally there's a want for the world to be sustainable, and peace is definitely one of the big sustainable development goals. And at the same time, I think I mentioned as well during our conversation later that a lot of technologies that has been very beneficial to humanity has been through the research development of the defense industry, like DARPA. A lot of technologies have come from there, so it's not necessarily as as straightforward as one would like to think. A lot of really competent people are developing very incredible technologies that can be advantageous for society. But I think we need to remind ourselves always of the purpose of why are we developing these technologies. And we are facing a climate crisis, and at the same time we are facing a pandemic. So, and ideally we want AI to be helpful in addressing these larger issues. that we are talking about and discussing together. So that's just generally that's my perspective.
Thank you. Deepika, you talked a lot about how AI is being implemented in fighting the pandemic, or like reassuring more or less a normal life in pandemic. But so kind of pushing on that subject, like how will that continue in the post-pandemic world? Like how will AI place itself on the social impact scene after whatever is happening in 2020 will be over?
Yeah, so the greatest impact will be on the healthcare sector, where healthcare facilities are not really very accessible. So for instance, if you take rural regions in India, so going remote or telehealth is going to be the key going forward. Yet another impact, large impact now that there is a lot of education going online, right? So AI for education is yet another important application that the post-pandemic world will see. So virtual assistants and chatbots, right from the stage of primary education, that will take over the world. And for many other applications, so AI in the context of environment is being used for wildlife conservation, for waste management, like I mentioned, for renewable energy operations and management. So with the advent of IoT, AI, and many other emerging technologies coming together, so that is when the greatest amount of value from AI will be realized.
Thank you so much. Myung-hyun, kind of coming into that, like how are Korean startups or Korean enterprises implementing AI in the social impact scene? Is that even a trend here at the moment, or is it still something that's just being talked about?
Pardon? 저기 그 김민지님이 좀 질문 한번 더 소개해 주셨습니다. 그러니까 AI의 여러 장점 중에 하나가 좀 객관적일 수 있다는 거라고 저는 생각해요. 우리가 이제 많은 사회적 이슈가 이제 계속 생기고 해결되지 않는 이유가 인간의 어떤 편견 때문인 경우가 많잖아요. 우리가 그 AI 모델을 이용해서 그러니까 인간이 편견이 배제된 좀 더 좋은 어떤 대안을 찾거나 결정을 내릴 수가 있는데 이제 그런 시도들은 지금 계속 한국에서 이루어지고 있습니다. 그리고 이거 좀 질문과는 약간 다른 답변인데 그 코로나19 이전에는 그 전 세계에서 이제 나라별로 지역별로 다른 문제에 봉착해 있었잖아요. 그런데 이번에 그 코로나라고 하는 똑같은 문제를 전 세계 200개가 넘는 나라가 똑같이 맞닥뜨리게 된 거예요. 그래서 우리가 AI를 이용해서 뭐 환자 수 증가를 예측한다든지 백신과 치료제를 개발을 더 빨리 한다든지 하는 것들이 전 세계 모든 나라가 동시에 하고 있습니다. 지금 전 세계 모든 나라가 똑같은 문제에 봉착했고 AI를 이용해서 같이 문제를 해결하고 있는 거고요. 이렇게 같이 해결책을 찾는 경험을 우리가 이번에 하게 된다면 앞으로 알렉스가 얘기한 뭐 지구온난화 문제라든지 환경 문제 같은 그것도 결국 전 인류가 같이 만나게 되는 문제인데 그런 문제도 우리가 같이 그 어떤 협업해서 해결책을 찾는데 AI가 중요한 수단으로 활용될 수 있을 거라 생각합니다.
I have one last question for all of you, and I think that's going to make you all very excited to hear it, which is what one trend or one invention in AI and big data from 2020 or 2020 and onwards has you very, very, very excited at the moment? Like, wow, this is going to be amazing. Why don't we start with you, Deepika? What are you looking forward?
So neuromorphic design and computing is something that is going to change the way AI is being implemented today. So this is more to do with mimicking how the brain is designed. The brain is capable of so much thought, but it consumes very less energy. So that is the concept that is being implemented in the hardware design of the chips for AI, and also the way the computational pattern happens. So this is going to change the AI, because one major concern today is that AI needs a lot of energy. So AI is not energy efficient today, but this is going to change the way AI is going to be implemented. And that is what I'm most excited about and looking forward to.
Well, that sounds really, really cool and neat. Myung-Nok, what about you? What is something, especially here in Korea, that we should be really excited about?
우리가 20년 전, 그러니까 그 2000년 그때를 되돌아보면 인터넷 기술을 이용한 회사와 그렇지 않은 회사로 구별된 건 아니었어요. 모든 회사가 결국 다 인터넷 기술을 이용했습니다. 하지만 인터넷 기술을 염두에 두고 회사의 시스템과 프로세스를 완전히 혁신한 회사가 있었고, 그렇지 않고 시스템과 프로세스는 그대로 두고 인터넷 기술만 도입한 회사가 있었어요. 앞에 회사는 큰 성공을 거뒀지만 뒤에 회사는 거의 다 사라졌죠. 결국 모든 회사들이 AI를 활용할 겁니다. 하지만 마찬가지로 AI를 염두에 두고 회사의 모든 시스템과 프로세스를 근본적으로 혁신하는 회사가 있을 것이고, 그렇지 않고 시스템과 프로세스는 그대로 두고 AI만 도입하는 회사가 있을 거예요. 당연히 앞에 회사는 크게 성공하고 뒤에 회사는 앞으로 도태될 겁니다. 지난 9개월 동안 코로나를 겪으면서 우리가 본의 아니게 우리의 시스템과 프로세스, 사고방식, 문화 이런 거를 좀 바꿔야 되는 상황에 직면했어요. 그렇기 때문에 AI 기술을 염두에 두고 우리가 근본적인 혁신을 하기가 오히려 지금 더 쉬워진 상황인 것 같습니다. 지금의 코로나 상황 자체는 정말 고통스럽고 안타까운 일이지만 이런 위기를 잘 활용해서 우리가 그간의 어떤 시스템 프로세스 일하는 방식, 문화, 사고방식 등을 좀 근본적으로 AI를 염두에 두고 좀 더 한 단계 좋아지도록 우리가 다시 설계할 수 있는 좋은 기회라고 생각합니다.
Changing so many aspects of our lives. Alex, is Back to the Future now? Like what should we be excited about when it comes to AI, and why?
Yeah, I think the potential for good is incredible. So I agree with with both of the other speakers in this regard. But I'm excited by this accessible AI combined with a greater focus on responsible technologies and collaboration. Because like the commercial application of AI, for example, such as the release of GPT-3 by OpenAI recently, that's a very advanced natural language processing algorithm, and it's now commercially available. But other companies as well, I'm sure, like as Honeywell, and I'm sure the companies in South Korea are working on these, making these commercial applications of AI accessible. But with that comes digital supply chains, value chains, and this climate carbon thoughts, because the physical impact of digital technologies has reached popular culture with these documentaries on Netflix and increased discussions. For responsible AI, we need sustainable systems and an increased consciousness in the application of technology.
Wow. Well, thank you all of you for your really interesting answers. I may not look like it, but I was really listening attentively to what you were saying. And I would love to dive deeper into some of the subjects, for instance, climate change and saving the environment through AI. I've been looking at the Microsoft/National Geographic program, and I'm like, wow, well, something to talk about. But unfortunately, we are constrained on time. So I would like to thank all our speakers a lot for giving us their time and for providing us with really, really interesting insights. And I would like to thank most of all Minji for the amazing translations. I know how hard simultaneous translation is, and it's amazing. And I think it will take some time for AI to match your level. So that's awesome. So thank you.
I would like to thank our renowned speakers for fascinating and very in-depth presentations about AI technology and big data and how that is influencing our current lives. I do hope you enjoyed those presentations as much as I did, as well as the Q&A. And I am inviting you all for our conference in October, which will be announced shortly. In the meantime, please stay safe and goodbye.